Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this first episode of the Bain Path to Purpose podcast. I'm Sara Visram, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Tahira Hussain. A little bit about myself. I graduated from the University of Birmingham in 2023 with a degree in mathematical economics and statistics and worked in audit for a year. I was involved in various community initiatives in Birmingham and endeavor to continue. Before we introduce our special guest for today, let's talk about what Path to Purpose is. This podcast is aimed at increasing the information on various career paths available to the youth of our community whilst incorporating the Deen and Dunya balance. I will now hand over to Tahira, who will introduce herself and our guest for today.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for that introduction, Zara. As Zara had said, my name is Tahira and I'll be the co-host to Path to Purpose podcast. So the aim of this podcast, as Zara said, is just to give us an insight into the various professionals within our community. I myself graduated from nursing last year and currently work in operating theatres in a variety of specialities. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hear the various careers within our community. To start off this podcast, we have Sister Sara. So thank you very much, Sister Sara, for joining us today. Just a little introduction. So Sara is a qualified academic pharmacist who currently works in education and training. So I'm really grateful that you were able to join us today for this podcast. And I'm really looking forward to hear your experiences in your expertise in pharmacy. And I'm sure our community and especially the youth will be really interested to hear how you got to where you are today, and also to just get an understanding of the career within pharmacy and the prospects that it has. So we'll probably start off with a bit of a background from you, if that's okay. So just to understand where you grew up, even, as it tends to be your community and your surroundings that help shape the people that we are today. So if you could give us a little background of who you are, and how you became a pharmacist.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, both of you, and thank you for having me here. I hope I can do it justice and share some insights. And for those of you that are joining us and listening, I pray that you get something out of it. But it's been really nice to listen to you both, Zara and Tahira, and just hear about your backgrounds and your stories. So inshallah, we take something from each other. So I'm a pharmacist, been a pharmacist for many years, 20 years, I think it is, this year actually. So that's a long time. That makes me feel pretty old, but I grew up in Milton Keynes. So that's where my family were from. We went to, lovely small community, or relatively small compared to Birmingham and the likes of Stanmore. It's a relatively small community. But it also meant that people were fairly close-knit and people sort of knew each other, and you often knew what people were doing. And if you needed advice, career advice, people were there to help you. People were willing to talk to you. And I'm sure that continues even in your bigger jamaats, and people are there. And this is part of what you guys are doing in a different form. We didn't have podcasts when I was at a stage where I was thinking about what to do. So I remember once my dad taking me around to different people's houses to talk to them and find out what they'd done. And that was a way of gathering information and trying to think about what I should and could do. But that's how it started, really. I decided to do pharmacy at university, and then just it went from there.
That's really nice to hear that that's sort of how it flourished. Did you have any pharmacists in your family, or did you know any personally that kind of gave you the encouragement to go into it, or was it something that you researched into yourself?
No, I think growing up, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. We didn't have any healthcare kind of medical professionals in the immediate family. So it was, my dad was in finance, chartered accountant, and then they went into business, my parents. So, there was no one kind of medically trained in healthcare, but I think, like many Asian parents, my parents were, um, the thinking that it's good to do something vocational that gets you a job at the end, and do something at university that will kind of guarantee you that. So I think it was kind of that age where we were like, okay, they're saying it for a reason, and you kind of trust them. And the more people I spoke to, I thought, okay, there's sense to this, like it's a solid degree. um, I think actually, if I take it back a step, when I did my GCSEs, I was kind of very um, on similar level with all of my subjects. I didn't have like real strengths in, for example, the sciences compared to the English languages, or your kind of history, geography, the humanities. So I kind of finished GCSEs and I was like, I got A's and B's in everything. So now what do I do? Because that kind of didn't leave me with like anything that I was really strong in. And I actually really was going to do history, English, because they're subjects that I loved. I love reading. So I was like, I enjoyed English and history. And then it was over the summer when I was about to start A levels, and when my dad was like, actually, if you do sciences, which you got okay grades in, they were the same as your English and your history. If you do the sciences, it leaves your options open to doing a science or healthcare, or some other kind of degree. So I think that for me was a lesson that it's really important to like talk to people. Maybe if you're not sure, keep your options open. I think the more you can find out, the better it is. Talking to people helps so much. They'll tell you, actually, recently I was talking to somebody that's decided to do a maths degree. I don't know much about maths and economics and those sorts of areas, but sorry, they've decided to do a maths A level because it keeps their options open for more degrees down the line, whereas they were thinking of doing kind of things that would perhaps close off things like economics and things at certain universities. Zara, that might be more your area, but actually that came about from talking to somebody, and they were like, oh my gosh, I learned this, I realized this, and now I'm, it was so useful because I'm going to do this, change my path a little bit, make one small tweak, and keep their options a bit more open. So I think in hindsight, I'm really grateful to the people that gave me their time, gave me their insight, let me come and shadow them and work with them. I think it did so much for me. I'm really grateful. And I think as a community member, it's kind of made me want to give back in whatever way I can. So being here, I'm like, okay, let me talk to other people. Let me share my own journey, because I know I learned so much from other people's.
Thank you. I think something that you said that I think something I could relate to was that thing about where our parents are like, oh, if you do science subjects or if you do a math subject, that gives you a bit of stability. Do you think that kind of influenced your career choice, or do you think that that actually helped you in your career?
I think it did. It did influence my career choice. I was sort of like, okay, I'm going to go and do pharmacy. There's a job at the end. I know what I'll be doing. But I think it also it gives you that little bit of security. It did influence me, but it also gave me the kind of confidence and flexibility to think about outside the box. I was like, okay, I've done pharmacy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like silo yourself or channel yourself just into one area or one box. You can still think within that about things that you do like. So, thinking about somebody that takes a path because they're a little bit kind of unsure, or they are influenced by parents, other people, you can still find within that things that you really enjoy, and you will discover your path.
Yeah, sounds great. I think from that I wanted to ask as well. So then from your career, it sounds like also when you said it's, made you give back to your community quite a bit. What would you say would be the most rewarding aspects of your job then, or from the different roles you've taken up in your
Mm.
career?
I think pharmacy, like many other healthcare professions, Tahira, you'll know this with your background, you really do make a difference in people's lives. And I think for me, it's that I do love engaging with people and feeling and seeing that I've helped them, whether it's kind of making a difference, giving them some advice that they go and implement and then they actually feel better, or a minor tweak with their medication that you realize where you've really helped them. They were suffering with something, and you just mention one small tweak, for example, about when they take their medicine, that makes everything suddenly okay. And they're able to carry on taking it, and as a result their symptoms subside, and you make a difference to their quality of life. So I think that I really enjoy. I love the fact that as a pharmacist you have the opportunity to really talk to people, get to know them, relate to them, and make a difference in their health. Is such a big thing. So we do often say, don't we, that health is wealth. It's the ultimate form. You can have many other things, but if you don't have your health. So I think as a pharmacist you really feel that you're able to contribute to one of the biggest aspects of a person's well-being.
That's so beautiful that you described it the way that you did. I think it just highlights that this is a career that, as you were saying, it helps so many people, but it can also give you the job satisfaction and almost the encouragement to do your best at your job. And, it gives you the motivation every day that you'll go into work and you know that you will make a difference to the people that you'll be supporting. And that's really nice to hear. What kind of qualities or personality traits do you think you need to have in order to be a successful pharmacist?
That's a really good one, because I feel like that's something I'd ask on like an interview panel for some of the things that I do. And I'm always quite keen to hear what students have to say. And I think really it's not a certain personality. It's not about being a certain personality type. I think rather it's you can have any personality, be of any personality type, but it's inculcating and developing some of the qualities that any personality could have. For example, I'm quite a people's person, so I'm an extrovert. I love meeting people. So when I worked in community pharmacy, like where I first started, I actually really enjoyed that part of it. But you can get an introvert, for example, that's in a community pharmacy, is busy all day, having to talk to people. That might be quite draining for them. That could have the opposite effect. But I think there's certain qualities as a pharmacist and other healthcare professionals. In fact, in the multidisciplinary team, I think you need some of the same qualities. You need good communication skills. You need to have empathy. You need good leadership. You need good problem solving skills, thinking on your feet, some of those things. But I think they're things that can be developed. They're not necessarily things that you're automatically, you have or you haven't, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think sometimes that comes with age and experience. I remember when I had my first ever job, I was so shy and so timid. And you slowly, as you go through your career, you really do develop the skills, especially when you interact with patients, with customers, and also with your team members. So it's just one of those skills that you do develop. And I think pharmacy as a whole just it kind of pushes you into that environment where you will be interacting with people, so automatically you'll start to gain those skills. um
Definitely.
yeah.
One thing that I've seen is that in the academic processes, as in the qualification, going to university, and the degree processes, they do so much of that in you. It is about personal development. The degrees are kind of designed to create those qualities in you, whether you like it or not. So you develop your communication skills. You don't just sit there and learn clinical stuff all the time. You develop your communication skills, your problem solving skills, your ability to work within a team. There's so many other qualities that are developed in that process.
Definitely. And in healthcare, you come across a range of different characters and a range of different people. So you need to learn how to remain professional in situations that can be
Mm.
quite challenging. And also when you're breaking bad news to patients. So I can imagine there must have been situations where medication hadn't arrived for the patient.
Medicine supply issues are like in the news all the time. It's a real problem. So as a pharmacist you are constantly having to deal with that. So I remember talking to patients and having to say, look, you're basically not going to get this medicine that you love, a particular brand of a medicine that you're on and you really like and you're established on it. You're going to have to change. Or telling people that they have to take 2 tablets instead of 1 because they've got to make up, for example, 45 milligrams of something, and only the 30 and the 15s are available. And for some people that can be quite upsetting. I remember once speaking to a patient that had been diagnosed, and I think it was arthritis that they had been diagnosed with. So they've been prescribed some medicines, come along to the pharmacy, the thinking that, okay, great, so I'll take this and it will cure me. It will sort of, make the arthritis go, right? So having to explain to them that, look, this isn't going to go. And unfortunately, it's not curable. It's something that you're probably going to have to live with. Breaking harsh or sad news like that is pretty tough, especially if you think about the setting. The person has kind of come into a busy community pharmacy. They're not sort of, there's other people around. It's not a secluded environment until you take them into a consultation room. But telling them that, look, this is going to help you every day to kind of do your day-to-day activities and improve your quality of life and help you to do what you want to do, but it's not actually going to get rid of it. Situations like that can be quite tough, and that you see that every day. There are much harder situations that you have to deal with. Community and hospital pharmacists and GP pharmacists will have stories like that, but yeah, small example.
I did want to ask, I think that you spoke so much about like the different opportunities available within pharmacy and, being an introvert, extrovert. There's different opportunities that every different kinds of people can really do. I think somebody who comes from like a finance background, when I think about pharmacy, I just think about it as one job. You kind of just hand out prescriptions and stuff like that. So I'd just like to know a little bit more about what maybe a typical day looks like in pharmacy and kind of what kind of job opportunities could be available. And also for me, some career progression is something that's quite important. How can I grow in this field? Where can I get what level can I get up to, basically? You have basically 2 decades of experience, so anything that you can share would be great.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people have the conception that pharmacists kind of are the medicine people, and effectively that is the bread and butter. Pharmacists are experts in medicines, and are there to support the other healthcare professionals in really making those decisions about medicines and making sure people get the most out of them. But I think things have changed in pharmacy. So pharmacists were traditionally just kind of doing more dispensing, and the way that legislation and the healthcare system has changed is that they're moving away from that. So there's a lot less dispensing roles and there's a lot more kind of medicine management and making clinical decisions and prescribing. So pharmacists now are kind of working in, you've got your community pharmacies, pharmacists in hospital. You also have many that have joined GP surgeries. I think a few years ago you would go to a GP surgery and mainly only see a doctor. Now you might see a physician's associate, you might see a nurse prescriber, you might see a pharmacist prescriber. So there's a lot more opportunities for pharmacists to do a lot more, to do different things. And a lot of them are not actually the physical kind of dispensing and handing out of medicines the way other professions are able to. Pharmacists are spending more time doing the clinical stuff, more time doing the talking to patients, delivering the services. Even in community pharmacy, pharmacists are treating minor conditions. They're able to have consultations with people, so that you speak to pharmacists in community that are now in the consultation room most of the day, and the dispensary is kind of running more so, with them supervising it and maybe coming in and out and doing clinical checks and things like that. So things have really changed, and I think the opportunity for growth is a lot more. The responsibility is more, because if you're prescribing and you're making much more complex clinical decisions and you're much more involved in the point of clinical decision making for patients or with patients, which we really believe in is a shared process between the patient and you. The stakes are a lot higher, but the training has also developed to reflect that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's a lot. I think that listening to that as somebody who would want to go into pharmacy, I think that's a lot of good information that you've provided, which is really great. I think also, whilst you were talking about that, realized we're here as women, all women here on this. You're a woman from STEM. And I think, Alhamdulillah, over the past few years, women in STEM, women in sort of these kind of roles, and also women working has alhamdulillah been encouraged. It's a lot more acceptable. But did you face any sort of challenges with, being a woman in STEM, maybe in this country? And yeah, any challenges in relation to that?
I think as a woman, as a mum now, like it's always about striking a balance. I think even as a Muslim, we do really believe Islam promotes the middle path, balance and everything. We're not sort of we know our time and life on this earth is finite, and whether you work to live or live to work, there's kind of a balance to be struck, isn't it? So for me, it's very much about having that balance. And I think anything that would completely take me away from being a mum, being present at home, would not doesn't work well. So I've had to kind of think about what I do, the roles that I do as a mum. Does it work for me? Do the hours fit? And I think that's a challenge that mums in all sectors have. Whether it's pharmacy or law or finance, it's really difficult to find things that are school hours that work for you. Um, I'm blessed. I feel really lucky, alhamdulillah, that I'm, able to often, do the school drop off and things like that. I have, and I think that's more because I've been in the academic side of pharmacy. So being in academia, there's a bit more flexibility. I have a lot of friends that are doing more general practice, a GP surgery, pharmacist roles, where again you can be a bit more flexible about the number of days. I think community pharmacy is tough because you do have longer days in community. So they're not particularly hours that work around the school run and children. But then you find ways of making it work. For example, not working full time or having family around you to support you. So it's difficult, but I think as women, mums, Muslims, we find a balance and make it work.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think having just gotten married recently as well, I know it's nothing what compares to what you do as a mom, but I think sometimes I do find it difficult to strike that balance. But like you said, having supportive family really helps with that, and just striking that balance is really crucial. Just one question before I give it back to Tyra. Sorry, I'm kind of hogging this. But I think you always talk about community, and even when I think about Birmingham Jamaat, like you're one of the people on that I kind of that comes to my mind. And I think I was at madrasa once, I was walking to my class and I bumped into you. I don't know if you remember this. I bumped into you and we kind of got into a chat about, madrasa and you teaching. And I think you taught the younger years, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
How did that, how does that community involvement come within you teaching at madrasa? How do you find that balance with being a mom, so busy with work? Yeah, where does that all come from?
I think as a healthcare professional, it is kind of about caring for people and doing the extra, kind of going the extra mile just to make somebody's life that little bit easier. Tahara, you can probably so relate to it. You can either make things a little bit easier for a patient or you can make things a little bit harder. And as I said, I'm a people's person. I've got that empathetic streak. So for me, that comes really naturally. So I think to me, it goes really hand in hand about caring for people. Um, and I think the community, we're so lucky to be part of something where it's so easy to give back. There are so many opportunities. It's like whether you like, you know, making food or parking cars or teaching or doing admin, doing spreadsheets, whatever it is you like doing, it's almost like there's this opportunity to do that. So I think there's just so many ways in the community that you can give back. And it's not just healthcare professionals. Everyone has that streak where they want to do something for other people. I think it's innate, it's part of human nature. Zara, you're a great example of that in how much you do. And you're not in sort of healthcare. So clearly it's not just those people. But I think for me as a pharmacist, it just makes sense to kind of care for people in different ways. Um, so I guess it's just about finding time or creating, having the desire. And I feel like I've benefited so much from being part of the community, growing up in Milton Keynes. I can tangibly tell you things the ways that I think the community benefited me from keeping me grounded and tied to my religion and deen, to showing me examples of people that were successful in their professions, but also had community roles. There were so many benefits. As I said, many people that guided me and told me, how to go about university applications and what they did, what their careers involved. So I just feel like it makes sense for me to do the same. So madrasa is a really typical example. I benefited from madrasa for the years that I attended several years ago in Milton Keynes. My kids attend madrasa here, and I kind of feel that if I can't give back as a teacher for some years, I've been doing it for about 7 years, then am I really doing justice to the community system? Because it is all about everyone giving, 5-10%, rather than one or two people giving 50, 100% sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I think that last bit you said, really, I would like to emphasize on that. If you can get involved in your local community, even if it's, one day out of a month, that's really, really important, because you can see our volunteers getting really burnt out. And yeah, your community gives you a lot, so it's only right if
Mm.
you can give something back. But yeah, so thank you so much for those insights. Yeah, Tyra, go.
Like, I really love listening to your explanation of, why it's so important to you to give back to the community. Another thing that we really learn from our religion, as well as going back to the community, is how important it is to gain knowledge. Because I remember hearing from a scholar recently say that part of our faith is to gain as much knowledge as, well, not as much knowledge as we can, but be the best in our field, because we represent our faith. And we should be the best in the field that we are in, so that we can do the best for the people in the community we're in as well. So I know you touched on something, that the pharmacy degree does give you, the ability to progress. So that was being able to be a prescriber. In the
Mm.
past, that was a role that only doctors or GPs were able to do. But now nurses can become prescribers, pharmacists can become prescribers. So what is the process like that? Because I think a lot of young people now would like to go for the master's route, or the prescribing additional courses that you can do on top of your bachelor's. So
Yeah.
do you have an insight into that at all?
Yeah, with pharmacy, if you when you qualified, you would come out of university with your masters of pharmacy and do a year's pre-reg and become a pharmacist. Recently, as of this year, 2025, the degree is changing to include prescribing. So
Wow.
if you qualify or graduate in 2025 and then do your foundation training, you'll graduate or qualify in 2026 as a prescriber. So it's now built into the undergrad. So I think those people are really lucky. There are a lot of people in my generation of pharmacists that are having to do the prescribing course as an additional course. It takes about 6 months. Um, and it's a certificate in prescribing. There are many. I did it. I have many friends that are doing it, and there are many pharmacists that are continuing to do it. So if you're kind of qualified already, that's what you're looking at doing, a 6 months qualification where you have to spend 90 hours being supervised in practice and learning the prescribing on the job, so workplace based training effectively. But as I said, in as of this year, that's changing. So in years to come, pharmacists that are qualified won't have to go back and do the training. Having said that, with pharmacy, there are a lot of things that you will continuous professional development. So the CPD element is really strong. You constantly have to do it. And I know it's the same in all healthcare professions. I know it's the same in finance and law. You kind of have to keep abreast of what's going on. I've got a brother in accounting. My dad was in accounting. So for me, I'm familiar with that they all have to do CPD. It's not exclusive to pharmacy or healthcare. But I think in pharmacy, there are lots of different routes that you can go down. There are clinical diplomas that people do to specialize in certain clinical areas. So that's more prominent in hospital pharmacy, where people will do a clinical diploma and, for example, become more specialist in cardio, um, or gastro, or a particular area that they're interested in. Similarly, in general practice, pharmacists are specializing. So you might have a pharmacist that's a specialist in diabetes and will focus more on seeing patients in a diabetic clinic, and are able to go into really in-depth complex clinical care with patients. I know many in the community, and they're really incredible. The level of knowledge is phenomenal. In community, you're probably more of a generalist. A community pharmacist kind of has to be a bit more general and be able to treat more minor conditions, but a bit of everything. They could be speaking to somebody 1 minute with a migraine, and then the next minute they've got some sort of, foot problem or infection. And it's not easier, because you kind of have to be in tune with everything. You need to look out for some of the more serious and sinister stuff. You can't afford to miss anything. You can't afford to take risks with people's health. And you've got to make some really tough decisions on the spot sometimes as a community pharmacist. So the stakes are pretty high. But there's lots of opportunities for more advanced qualifications, even MBAs or leadership qualifications. I have gone down more of an academic route. So I've done teaching qualifications and masters and things in teaching, because my roles require me to have more insight into how people learn. And when I'm developing educational content, I've got to really understand how learning happens and be able to apply that into the things that I develop. But I think, on the note of Islam encouraging us to seek knowledge, my learning hasn't stopped as a pharmacist really in the 20 years. I've constantly done some sort of course or development. I think I've had a bit of a break in the last 2 years actually, and not done anything formal in terms of learning, but that's actually given me a little bit of a chance to do some other things. So, for example, a Quran course, which I've wanted to do for a long time, or a parenting course. We're really lucky again in our deen that these things are really encouraged, and there's so many opportunities for learning. But as a pharmacist, I think it depends what area, what field, what route you go into as to what some of those learning pathways might be. For example, if you're in community, or if you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you might be more about leadership and business management and things like that. In hospital pharmacy, it's more clinical diplomas, and again, leading on to leadership. In my role in academia, it's much more about educational courses and masters in education and things like that.
Oh, that's amazing. So there's such a variety of sort of pathways people can go into it.
Mm.
There's lots of room for development, which I think is a big part, because you always want to grow in your career and progress on to the next thing. And it's also nice how you mentioned that you can go into whichever niche suits you. So you can kind of maybe spend the early years of your career discovering which area you want to stick to. Did you ever feel like your Islamic values were ever compromised when you were at work? I can give you an example from nursing. Um,
Go
so
for it.
yeah, so one of the rules required in healthcare settings is that we must be bare below the elbow. So in contact with patients, you are required to remove your sleeves or to roll them up in order to maintain infection control, and basically to prevent the spread of germs from patient to patient. So I remember when I first started, I really, really couldn't get my head around it, and I didn't know, what my religious obligation was in that situation, but also my obligation to my work, and following the rules that, everyone has to follow in the NHS. It's not just me that's a Muslim person facing this. Many other Muslim women were facing the same issues. So, do you feel like you've ever had a situation like that, or is pharmacy a little bit more lenient? Because I know for nursing, things like uniform and the policies they have on us
Yeah.
are very, very strict, especially in a hospital setting.
Yeah, I think as a pharmacy student, or even as a pharmacist, I can't think of situations like that. There are obviously situations where you have to be quite close to, quite intimate with, in proximity to somebody of the opposite gender. And I think as sort of, back in the day, I would have found that quite difficult. You were saying when you first started, you were very timid. And I remember feeling that way, that I'm out of my comfort zone and this is a bit awkward. And in teaching, I've seen that a lot, that students really have to develop and be able to become comfortable with that skill. I've seen, for example, in teaching, I've seen that you have to do a respiratory examination, and that requires you to touch the chest area of a person of the opposite gender. So it's difficult. You kind of think, this is, should I do this, or should I get a male colleague to do it on a male? And is it preferable if a female colleague does it on a female? That sort of thing. I've seen many students, Muslim students, struggle with that a lot as well, especially maybe for women it's a bit easier in this situation. I've seen male students struggle with it with women, because often they have to actually sort of unbutton the shirt, or have access basically to be able to conduct that chest examination, observe breathing. It's not easy to say to a male Muslim student, when you measure the respiratory rate, for example, in somebody, you're checking their pulse, and to make sure that their breathing is natural and relaxed, you'll count their respiratory rate and their breaths at the same time. So you're actually just watching their chest rise and fall to check to look at how many breaths they're taking. And actually that can be quite uncomfortable. What if a woman says, why are you staring at my that area? It can feel quite inappropriate. So I think we have to come out of our comfort zones a little bit. You have to know what's appropriate. You have to think about how you do things to make things feel comfortable, and how you approach things to explain to the person nicely, especially if you have Muslim patients, or patients that are a bit older. They might actually feel more uncomfortable than you, and you might need to explain to them that this is why I'm doing it. You can make them feel reassured by explaining to them, and that's actually kind of good patient, good communication, good counseling skills, good consultation skills in the first place, to explain what you're going to be doing, ask them if they're okay with it, consent, asking them if there's somebody that they would like in the room, or would they like someone to be chaperone, that sort of thing, to make sure that they're comfortable. So I think as a healthcare professional, to get close to people, to conduct examinations on people, it can be difficult. And I think that's one that pharmacists are having to learn, because traditionally, before prescribing, pharmacists were not doing clinical examination skills, physically touching and assessing people. We actually kind of did everything without touching. So new pharmacists might be more accustomed to it because they're doing it at university, but pharmacists of my generation are having to learn that we actually have to now touch patients and get hands-on. And actually it's difficult, it's awkward, but it does require a little bit of mindset changing, and altering your thinking.
I mean, it's nice that you've, explained that, the pharmacists that are going through the course now might find it easier than pharmacists who graduated a couple of years ago. I think it goes to show that the field is evolving, and how
Mm.
is evolving. So how pharmacy is now is not necessarily how it will be in the future, but it's nice to see that the role is becoming more clinical, and that pharmacists can do that clinical role and do observations and do consultations that years ago they weren't able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say even in the nursing field, the way it's adapted and the way the role has changed, and depending on the field that you're in, it's, it's ever changing. But it gives the opportunity for us to really develop. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions from our viewers, maybe more questions than what we presented to you. Would there be an opportunity for them to reach out to you? So say, for example, if they saw you at the mosque, would you be okay to answer any questions? I'm sure you would, but
I'm honestly more than happy to talk to people. I do go into secondary schools, so I go into a more local, one of the local grammar schools, and go in and talk to students as part of their careers fair, and just explain what the university route is, things to think about when you're 16, 17, or even before that, to kind of get to the point what do I need to do to apply. And I do sit on some university panels, so I'm more than happy to talk to people. I've been in academia for like 10 years. So for me, any experience that I can share and help people with, I'm more than happy. So if anybody wants to reach out, honestly, or sees me and they just want to ask, I'm all ears.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. And there's also the career fair upcoming in May. So anyone who's unsure or wants to gain more information about pharmacy or any other healthcare careers, they're able to go to the career fair and sort of network with other professionals in the community and sort of ask their questions. I know Sister Sarah has been part of the team organizing that.
I have, and that's one of the reasons I agreed to this, because you won't hear from me there. I'm not one of the speakers that are talking or spending time talking to people. I think it's really nice to hear from different people. So luckily, you won't hear my story again. And I think it's again, I think this is where it taps into what we were saying about community. There's so many opportunities, and I think, alhamdulillah, we are as a community really blessed with how many resources we have within ourselves. So we've put together, and Tara, you will know this, we've got healthcare professionals from every single aspect of healthcare, from radiographers to podiatrists, dietitians, medics, really specialist medics, dentists, pharmacists, occupational therapists, chiropractors. The list is endless. So that's all within our community. So I think if you're considering a profession in healthcare, you want to know more about it, it's such a good opportunity to come and speak to people and learn from other people, and just have that insight into what others have done. And it's whenever it's in your community, it just seems so much more relatable and accessible. We've got a really amazing keynote speaker that will share their stories. So I think we're so lucky as a younger person to have these opportunities. I mean, my kind of time is gone, but as I said, I do try and find ways that I can give back in little ways. There's a wealth of knowledge and resource within the community. So we're really lucky that people are willing to share.
Thank you so much. I think one key takeaway that I've taken away from this is just the way that you've articulated everything and talked about your career. It's been with that mindset of having Islam as part and parcel of anything you do. And I think with this podcast, that's what we're encouraging people to do as well, is strike that balance between deen and dunya. Sometimes it's going to be challenging for us to achieve that, but that's the goal we should have in mind. And I think having these different career paths, it can be difficult to have that in mind, but I think taking that approach, we can see can be quite successful and quite rewarding as well as at times. So it was very nice to hear that. Thank you.
No, it was a pleasure to share. And I think whatever field you're in, whatever you do, there's always an opportunity to do it, with more faith and trust and honesty, and not be kind of, like sly or under, just thinking of Imam Ali's morals and values about how he would, not use the treasury resources to use light to have a conversation. So the story about the candles. So it's things like that, isn't it? Just thinking that, okay, I'm in the office, this is my office time, and just being more sincere and more dedicated. And I think that shows in the workplace, the akhlaq and the sincerity that comes with it.
Definitely, 100%. I think in this age of where we're working from home, that can be very difficult to sort of be sincere in what you're doing, right? Not logging on and then going off and doing something else can be quite difficult. But yeah, I think that's something I can resonate with, even just being from a finance background.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions that I had, really. I think there's a lot more that I want to ask, but that's beyond the time that we have for today.
Thank you, Sarah, for being our guest for this podcast. We've learned so much from your experience as a pharmacist. And inshallah, I'm sure all the viewers at home who'll be watching this podcast as well will have picked up some important information to think about and consider if they are planning to do the course. So thank you so much. And again, just like Sarah said, she is happy to answer any questions. So if you do see her in the mosque, definitely get in touch with her if you have any questions, or you can contact the Bain Instagram page and you can be directed to her. So yeah, thank you very much for joining into our podcast. This is our first episode of inshallah many more to come. We have a range of professionals that we will be interviewing over the coming over the coming year. So do tune in. Zara, do you want to mention who our next guest speaker will be?
Yes, inshallah, we will have Brother Muhammad Riaz, who is in the banking industry. So it'll be quite interesting to hear from him. So we had the health industry this time, and then we'll have a finance industry next time. So anyone who's interested in that, please do tune in. Look forward to our next podcast, inshallah. Thank you so much, everyone, for their time. And inshallah, we will look forward to our next podcast. Please continue to support us and do provide us with any feedback.